They said the ocean was free, but that was before the gates went up, before the signs appeared. Private coastline, entry for members only, before the children of Isla Jamara stood at the edge of the road, staring through metal fences at the same water their grandparents once fished from. This story is not rumor, it's a record. It begins with a whistle, a phone call, and a map that disappeared from government archives. So listen to the end, because what you're about to hear will change how you see every Caribbean paradise on a postcard. It started quietly, 5 years ago. The beaches of Isla Jamara were the country's pride, long stretches of white sand, coconut palms bending toward turquoise water, where vendors sold roast breadfruit and laughter carried on the wind. Tourists came from every corner of the world, and the government said it was good for the economy. Tourism is our treasure, the ministers repeated. But locals noticed something strange. One beach after another was closing for renovations. Wooden fences went up. Restricted area, the sign said. And when they reopened, locals were told they had to pay. At first, it was small, a few dollars at the gate, a maintenance fee. But soon, whole coastlines disappeared behind private resorts. Fishermen, who had cast their nets there for generations, were chased off by security guards. An old man named Papa Ben, a fisherman from St. Anne Bay, told a young journalist, "When I was a boy, DC was free. Now, DC belonged to people who don't even live here." That journalist was named Mara Duval, and she was about to uncover something far bigger than she ever imagined. One evening, Mara received an anonymous email from an address that looked like a joke, seasoldout@protonmail.com. The message contained only 5 words. Check the Coastal Harmony Agreement. She searched the government website, nothing. She called a contact in the Ministry of Tourism, silence. Then, a week later, a man in a wrinkled suit approached her at a gas station. He whispered, "Meet me by Dunn's Bluff at midnight. Bring no phone." That night, under a sky full of stars, he handed her a sealed brown envelope. Inside was a single document, stamped confidential, and a map of Isla Jamara's coastline marked with red circles. At the top, it read, Coastal Harmony Development Partnership, Phase 1. According to the paper, the island's government had signed a 99-year lease with a consortium of foreign companies. Blue Harbor Investments, UK, Sungate Resorts, USA, and Aquanova Holdings, Dubai. In exchange for infrastructure development, the companies would receive exclusive management rights over 72% of the country's coastline. 72%. It wasn't a partnership. It was a sale. Even worse, a clause buried in the contract said that local access to coastal zones may be regulated according to safety and environmental standards. In plain language, it meant locals could be banned at any time. Mara's hands shook as she read the fine print. She turned to the man. "Who are you?" He smiled bitterly. "Someone who believed in the system too long." Then he disappeared into the night. The next morning, Mara tried to confirm the document. Every government official she contacted denied its existence. One hung up on her mid-sentence. Another warned, "You're digging in dangerous water." By the weekend, she received another email, this time with photos. They showed luxury resorts under construction, security checkpoints, and long pipelines running toward the sea. One image showed a sign with the logo of Blue Harbor and the words, "Authorized personnel. Only Isla Jamara. Coastal hub." But the last image made her stop breathing. It showed a document stamped "Top Secret," for cabinet use only. Underneath, one line stood out in red ink. Upon completion of Phase 3, all coastal titles shall transfer to the Jamara Development Council administered from Geneva. Geneva, Switzerland, the sea, the sand, the soul of the island, all being governed from 5,000 miles away. Mara realized this wasn't just corruption. It was colonization, rewritten in business language. And before she could publish her findings, her editor called. His voice was trembling. "Mara, I can't run your story. We've been warned. They said it's national security." "It's a braided was. National security?" she asked. He paused. "They said the coast is classified." That night, Mara's apartment was broken into. Her computer was gone. Her notes were missing. Only one thing was left on her desk, a shell, split in half, with a note inside that said, "The tide is coming." She didn't sleep. She knew she had crossed a line. But she also knew the story had just begun, because somewhere offshore, ships were already unloading containers labeled coastal access control systems. And the people of Isla Jamara had no idea that by the next year, they would need permission or payment just to touch their own sea. The morning sun rose over Isla Jamara like a burning question. News spread through whispers. Like wind between banana trees, people said something big was coming, something that would change the island forever. No one knew the details yet, but fishermen in the north said the ocean had a new smell, like oil and concrete. The government called it progress. The people called it theft. Mara Duval sat at a seaside cafe with her notebook open, staring at the waves. The air was heavy with salt and silence. Her phone buzzed. Another unknown message appeared. They meet tonight. Same hotel. Use the service elevator. No name, no number. Mara knew it was a risk. But she had already lost her fear the night someone broke into her home. So at 8:43 p.m., wearing a hotel uniform she borrowed from a friend, she walked into the Grand Coral Bay Hotel, the newest luxury resort on the island, the same one that had replaced what locals once called Freedom Beach. From behind a service cart, she watched a private meeting unfold in the top-floor conference room. Around the table sat 6 men in suits and 1 woman, their faces half-lit by the glow of a projector. On the screen was a map, the coastline again, with zones labeled A, B, and C. A voice with an English accent said, "Zone A will be secured first. Locals can't have free access during construction." Another man, wearing a badge that read Aqua Nova Holdings, replied, "Once the surveillance gates are installed, entry will require biometric passes. We'll tell the press it's for environmental protection." The woman, who appeared to be a local government minister, laughed nervously. "You think the people won't notice?" "They will," the Englishman said, pouring himself a drink. "But by then, it'll be too late. The contract's locked. Even your parliament can't break it." Mara's heart raced. She lifted her phone slowly and snapped a picture. But as she did, a security guard spotted her reflection in the glass door. "Hey, you!" he shouted. She ran. Through the kitchen, down the service stairs, into the alley behind the hotel. She could hear footsteps chasing her, radios crackling. "She's heading toward the west exit." She turned a corner and crashed straight into a man holding a camera. "Whoa," he said, catching her arm. "Mara Duval?" She froze. "Who are you?" "Name's Kale," he said, showing her a press badge. "Freelancer. I've been following the same trail. You just confirmed everything." Together, they escaped through the back streets, eventually hiding inside an old fishing shed by the harbor. Mara showed him the photo she took. Kale's eyes widened. "That's the Minister of Development, and the same guys who signed the Coral Charter in Barbados last year. You know what this means?" She nodded slowly. "They're selling the whole coast, every inch." He pointed at the photo again. "Look closely. That paper on the table, it says Coastline Security Act. That's new. It's not even been announced yet." Mara's hands trembled as she zoomed in. The text was blurry, but one sentence was clear. All coastal access must be approved by the Jamara Development Council in partnership with authorized foreign entities. "Foreign entities," she whispered. "That means the people can't even protest without permission." Kale's voice turned cold. "They're turning your country into a resort colony." The next day, Mara and Kale went public but carefully. They released fragments of the evidence anonymously online under the account name Free the Sand. Within hours, the island exploded with outrage. Hashtags flooded social media. Number Our Sea, number No Paywall, number Jamara Sold Out. Government officials tried to discredit the leaks, calling them fake news. But locals knew the truth. They had seen the fences go up with their own eyes. That evening, a crowd gathered at Coral Bay's entrance, chanting, "The beach is ours. The beach is life." Security forces arrived, but the people didn't move. Elderly women sat down in the sand in protest. Fishermen formed a line across the gates. Then came a sound that silenced everyone, a bulldozer's engine. It rolled slowly toward the protest, escorted by armed guards. A man in a suit shouted through a megaphone, "This is private property. Leave immediately or face arrest." But no one left. Mara filmed everything from a rooftop nearby. The bulldozer stopped inches from the protesters. One woman barefoot, wearing a faded yellow dress, stepped forward, lifted a handful of sand, and threw it at the machine. "This is my mother's land!" she cried. The crowd roared. The guards hesitated. They weren't ready for the people's defiance. And in that hesitation, something shifted. The spirit of the island rose again. Later that night, Mara uploaded the footage. Within 24 hours, it went viral across the Caribbean. People in neighboring islands began sharing their own stories of lost beaches, fenced shores, and foreign partnerships. But while the island celebrated its awakening, a storm was brewing in the shadows. A message appeared in Mara's inbox, sent from the same anonymous source. "You lit the fire. Now they will come for you. Leave tonight. Phase 2 begins tomorrow." She looked out toward the ocean, where faint lights blinked offshore, dozens of ships lined up on the horizon, carrying unknown cargo. The coast was no longer just locked. It was under siege. By dawn, Isla Jamara was unrecognizable. The sound of the waves was now mixed with the metallic hum of machinery and the thud of construction along the coast. The once open beaches were guarded by men in black uniforms with no national insignia. Their trucks bore a simple logo, Blue Harbor Security Division. Mara Duval watched from a clifftop near Coral Bay, binoculars pressed to her eyes. She counted at least 6 ships offloading crates marked infrastructure equipment. But what she saw being unpacked wasn't cement or tiles, it was metal poles, surveillance drones, and fiber cables that ran underground straight toward the water. Kale's voice came through her earpiece. "They're setting up sensors. This isn't tourism, it's data control. They're wiring the coast like a military zone." Mara's stomach twisted. They're building something bigger than hotels. They're building a border. As the sun climbed higher, word of the foreign fences spread like wildfire through the island. Fishermen found red buoys in the sea, marking restricted zones. Families who had lived near the shore for generations were suddenly told to leave their homes. Environmental relocation, the officials called it. A fisherman named Rohan James, who had spent 40 years on the water, was told he needed a coastal permit to cast his net. When he refused, 2 guards pushed him into the sand and tore his boat's sail apart. Someone filmed it, and by afternoon, it was everywhere online. The island was boiling. Mara and Kale knew they had to dig deeper. They traveled to the capital, Kings Point, to meet with a contact inside the Ministry of Lands, a young clerk named Alia, who had been quietly sending them files. She looked terrified when they arrived. "You shouldn't have come here," she whispered. "They're watching everyone in the press. The whole ministry's been infiltrated." Mara leaned forward. "Infiltrated by who?" Alia hesitated, then handed them a flash drive. "These are internal memos. You'll see for yourself, but you didn't get them from me." They left immediately and checked into a small motel outside the city. Kale plugged in the flash drive. Inside were hundreds of pages of classified documents. One file stood out, Coastal Harmony, Phase 2 Transition Report. It described the next stage of the operation, the creation of a private coastal authority, jointly owned by the foreign companies and a handful of local ministers. Its official mission was to ensure environmental stability and investment confidence. But the real section marked internal use only was chilling. The authority shall assume ownership of all public coastal lands deemed underdeveloped or mismanaged. The government will serve as facilitator. The people will serve as stakeholders without decision-making power. Mara read the words again. Stakeholders without power. That means they'll use the people's names to justify their own control. Kale's voice trembled. "Look at this page, revenue sharing plan. 85% to the foreign consortium, 15% to the national treasury, and that 15% goes through offshore accounts." He scrolled further down. Another file appeared, confidential. Strategic Communications Plan. It outlined how to reframe public outrage using paid influencers and media campaigns about sustainable tourism. Mara slammed her fist on the table. "They're buying the island with propaganda." Before they could process it, the power in the motel flickered, then went out completely. Kale froze. They found us. They grabbed their bags and bolted out the back door, sprinting into the dark alley as headlights turned the corner. Two black SUVs screeched to a stop outside the motel. Men in suits poured out, scanning the street with flashlights. Mara and Kale ducked behind a dumpster. Kale whispered, "We need to get off the island. And this is the Clossie to the Pros." But Mara shook her head. "No, if we run, they win. The people need to know before it's too late." That night, they escaped into the countryside, hiding in a small fishing village where locals still remembered a time before fences. The villagers gave them food, shelter, and something more powerful stories. An old woman named Miss Ora told them about the first signs of betrayal. "It start long time, child. When they said they'd help build roads, but took the sugar lands instead. This time, they want D-Hole C." Kale recorded her voice. "Why do you think the government let it happen?" She smiled sadly. "Because the ones who sign D papers don't live like us. They don't swim here. They don't bury their dead here. To them, the sea is money. To we, it's memory." Her words hit Mara like thunder. The island wasn't just being exploited, it was being erased. The next day, Kale managed to contact an international reporter based in Trinidad. They arranged a secret call. But just as they connected, the line went dead. Moments later, their satellite phone buzzed with a new message. "Stop digging. We already know where you are." Kale looked up from the screen, panic flashing in his eyes. They traced the signal. Outside, a helicopter roared in the distance. Mara grabbed the flash drive. "No matter what happens," she said, "this truth must live." She handed it to Miss Ora. "If we don't make it, you give this to the people." Miss Ora nodded. "The sea will keep it safe." That night, lightning split the sky over Isla Jamara. The wind howled. Somewhere near the harbor, flames rose, the government's archives were burning. And amid the chaos, foreign cargo ships sailed silently into the dark, carrying more than containers. They carried control. Because the next morning, the president of Isla Jamara would make a speech that would shock the world and reveal just how deep the island had already been sold. At 9 a.m. sharp. Every television, radio, and phone screen on Isla Jamara lit up with the face of the president. His smile was stiff, his tone rehearsed. Behind him hung two flags, the national one, and beside it a new white and blue banner bearing the logo of the Coastal Authority. "My beloved citizens," he began, "today marks a historic partnership between Isla Jamara and our trusted international allies. Together, we will transform our shores into a global symbol of progress. The Coastal Authority will protect our environment, create jobs, and ensure sustainable growth for all." He paused, scanning the teleprompter. Then he said the line that made every listener's blood run cold. "Effective immediately, all public beaches will be temporarily closed for environmental assessment. Citizens are advised not to enter restricted areas without official clearance." For the people of Isla Jamara, that meant one thing. The ocean was no longer theirs. Across the island, outrage exploded. Fishermen refused to pull their boats ashore. Vendors refused to move their stalls. Families stood by the gates of their villages, holding signs that said, "We were born here, we belong here." But behind the protests, something darker brewed. That same morning, the international press received an anonymous leak, dozens of internal memos from the Coastal Authority. The sender called themselves the Tide. The documents exposed everything: the 99-year contracts, the bribes to ministers, the offshore accounts in Switzerland. The biggest shock came from one file labeled Project AQA Line, classified. It revealed that the undersea cables being installed along the island weren't just for resorts, they were for data transfer. The companies weren't only controlling the beaches, they were controlling communication between the island and the outside world. Every phone call, every email, every online post could be routed through their system. The island wasn't just losing its coast, it was losing its voice. Meanwhile, in a small house, hidden behind the mangroves, Mara Duval and Kale watched the president's speech in silence. "He's reading their script," Kale whispered. "He sold them the country for a handful of dollars." Mara's phone buzzed again, another message from the unknown contact. "They're moving money tonight. Blue Harbor, Sungate, Aquanova offshore. If you can stop it, do it now. Kale frowned. Stop it? How? The same way they control us, she said. With the internet. They spent hours hacking into the Coastal Authority's public-facing servers, tracing offshore accounts, and linking them to government officials. Each transfer led to a name: ministers, business magnates, even a few members of the president's own family. Then, just before midnight, they uncovered a folder marked Operation Saygate, Priority. Inside was a video recording. It showed the president sitting in a luxury office on a yacht, speaking with two foreign executives. The man from Blue Harbor said, "Once the transfers are complete, we'll move to Phase 3. You'll get your final payment. After that, public protests won't matter. We'll control the shoreline, the ports, even the data servers." The president leaned forward. "And the people?" The executive smirked. "They'll adapt. They always do." Mara's jaw tightened. "We're releasing it." Kale hesitated. "If we post that, we'll never be safe." She looked him straight in the eyes. "We're not safe now." They uploaded the video to every platform they could reach. Within minutes, it went viral. The entire island and the entire world saw the truth. The president's face, his words, his betrayal. Crowds filled the streets of Kings Point by sunrise. The chant echoed through every corner of the capital. "Give us back our sea!" Government forces tried to block the protests, but police officers began removing their helmets, joining the marchers. Soldiers refused to fire. By afternoon, the Parliament building was surrounded. The president was nowhere to be found. Rumors spread that he had fled the island on the same yacht from the video, but the people's anger didn't stop there. They turned toward the new Coastal Authority headquarters, a glass tower overlooking the water. Mara and Kale stood among the crowd as it swelled into thousands. "They're not just angry," Kale said. "They're awake." Suddenly, a loudspeaker crackled. "Attention, this is private property. Please disperse." No one moved. Then, from somewhere in the crowd, a fisherman raised a conch shell to his lips and blew a long, trembling note. Others joined horns, drums, voices, a sound like the ocean itself rising. And then, something unbelievable happened. The sea began to swell. Waves crashed harder against the walls of the Coastal Authority Tower, breaking through barriers and flooding the lower levels. It was as if the ocean had turned against its captors. People screamed and cheered at once, lifting their hands toward the storming sky. Kale grabbed Mara's hand. "It's like the island's fighting back." She stared at the chaos, her eyes filled with tears. "No," she said softly. "It's the people and the sea becoming one again." By nightfall, the power grid collapsed. Foreign executives fled in helicopters, and deep in the flooded office of the Coastal Authority, the logo that once symbolized ownership drifted away, washed clean by the very sea it tried to own. But the fight wasn't over. Because as Mara and Kale would soon discover, Phase 3 wasn't cancelled. It had already begun. The island woke up to a strange calm the next morning, the kind that hides danger beneath silence. The streets were empty, yet the air was heavy, charged, as if the ocean itself was holding its breath. Mara and Kale sat in a small cafe near the edge of Kings Point, watching the news on a cracked television. The headlines were chaotic. Government collapses after data leak. Foreign executives missing. Isla Jamara declares state of emergency. But one headline stood out like a ghost. The Coastal Authority relocates to offshore platform. Kale looked up from the screen. They didn't lose power. They just moved it offshore. And this is a lot of the Dishan actually take it. Remember self. Mara frowned. "You mean?" "Exactly. They're building a floating city, a private island state, outside any law. The deals still stand, just not on land." He showed her an image captured by a satellite feed. A vast metallic structure floating miles out at sea, surrounded by ships and cranes. On its side was the familiar symbol, the white and blue wave of the Coastal Authority. It was bigger than anyone had imagined. "They're creating a new nation," Mara whispered. "A nation of the rich, built on what they stole from us." As they planned their next move, the door of the cafe creaked open. An old man entered, wearing a fisherman's cap and carrying a wet radio wrapped in plastic. "UD journalists?" he asked in a low voice. Mara nodded cautiously. He placed the radio on the table and turned the knob. Static filled the room then, a woman's trembling voice came through. "This is Alia. From the Ministry of Lands. If you hear this, it means I survived. The Coastal Authority wasn't just stealing land, they were mining data from every islander's phone and selling it to banks abroad. I have the final report. It's called Project Seagate Annex 4. The document is hidden inside the state archives, under the codename Paradise Bonds. Find it before they do. The transmission cut abruptly. Mara's heart raced. Aaliyah's alive, Cale exhaled. Then, the war isn't over. They left immediately, heading toward the capital's abandoned government quarter. Smoke still curled from the charred remains of the Ministry of Lands. Inside the ruins, files and burnt paper scattered like fallen leaves. Hours passed before they found the vault room. Behind a half-collapsed wall, a single cabinet door was still locked. On it, faintly scratched, were the words, Paradise Bonds. Cale pried it open. Inside was a waterproof box marked State Property, Top Secret. They opened it carefully, and what they found turned their blood cold. It wasn't just documents. It was a ledger. Names, numbers, transactions. Each entry corresponded to a bond, land deeds, port rights, and even fishing zones sold quietly over the past decade. The buyers weren't random corporations. They were connected to European hedge funds, US tech billionaires, and even Caribbean politicians. Every beach, every reef, every wave had a price. Cale whispered. They turned the coast into a stock market. Mara flipped through the pages until she saw one name that froze her hand midair. Royal Cayman Holdings, managed by Westwater Group. Westwater Group, the same company that had financed Blue Harbor. She stared at Cale. It's one network. The resorts, the data, the banks, all one web. Just then, a loud clang echoed from the hallway. Footsteps. Voices. They're here, Cale hissed. They stuffed the ledger into Mara's bag and slipped through a back exit, sprinting into the alleyways as black vans pulled up outside. Bullets shattered the walls behind them. Mara ducked behind a truck, breathing hard. They're not police. These are private contractors. Cale gritted his teeth. They want the ledger. They ran through the rain, dodging down narrow streets until they reached the harbor. There, at the pier, an old fishing boat was waiting, the same one that once belonged to Rohan, the fisherman who'd been attacked weeks earlier. His son stood beside it. You're the ones from the video, the young man said. My father's gone. But he said, if people like you ever need escape, the sea will carry you. Without hesitation, Mara and Cale climbed aboard. The boat's engine sputtered to life, cutting through the waves. Behind them, the city burned in flashes of gunfire. As they sailed farther from shore, the moon revealed the outline of the massive offshore platform in the distance, glowing with artificial light like a steel city on the sea. Cale pointed toward it. That's where the power went. Mara clutched the ledger to her chest. Then that's where the truth will go too. Lightning illuminated the horizon, and for a brief moment, they saw something extraordinary. Near the floating city, several small fishing boats were circling in silence. On each one, islanders held torches high. Dozens of boats, then hundreds, forming a ring of firelight around the offshore platform. The people came, Cale whispered. They're not giving up their sea. Mara smiled, the wind whipping her hair. This is it. The real revolution isn't on land anymore. It's on the water. But as their boat neared the circle of light, a deep rumble echoed beneath them. The waves churned violently. From the base of the platform, giant turbines began to spin, the ocean itself turning into a weapon. Cale shouted. They're activating defense systems. Water erupted like geysers, throwing boats into chaos. Screams echoed. Mara held onto the railing as the fishing boat tilted dangerously. Then everything went black. When she woke, hours later, she was lying on a beach she didn't recognize. The sun was rising. Her clothes were torn, her bag half buried in sand. Cale was nowhere in sight. She dug frantically through the sand until her fingers touched the wet, mud-stained ledger. It had survived, but a new horror awaited her. Carved into the sand beside her, in perfect block letters, were the words, "Welcome to Coastal Sector 1. The island she thought was safe wasn't. Phase 3 wasn't just offshore. It was spreading inland, and the sea, once the heart of freedom, was now a border controlled, coded, and claimed. Yet as Mara looked out toward the horizon, she saw a distant line of boats, returning villagers, rebels, fishermen carrying fire in their hands and fury in their hearts. The final battle for Isla Jamara had just begun. The final battle began not with guns, but with drums. By nightfall, the beaches of Isla Jamara were alive again, not with tourists or guards, but with the people. Thousands gathered under a stormy sky, holding torches, conch shells, and banners made from torn fishing nets. The sound of drums echoed across the sea like thunder, carrying one message through the night. We taking back de-water. Mara stood among them, exhausted, bruised, and barefoot, clutching the soaked ledger against her chest. The pages had begun to fall apart, but the truth inside was indestructible. Cale was still missing, but his voice seemed to live in the wind that swept across the waves. As lightning cracked above, the villagers pushed their small wooden boats into the surf. They were joined by fishermen from other islands, from St. Lucia, Trinidad, Dominica, and even Haiti. Word had spread beyond borders. Everyone who had ever been robbed of a coastline, of freedom, had come. The floating city glimmered on the horizon, the coastal authorities' last fortress, a monstrous platform of metal and greed. The people called it the Steel Leviathan. Mara climbed aboard one of the boats. "Tonight," she shouted, her voice trembling but fierce, "we sail not as victims but as witnesses. The world will see what they did to us." As the boats advanced through the roaring waves, spotlights from the Leviathan swept over the sea. A loudspeaker boomed from the platform. "Turn back immediately. You are entering a restricted maritime zone. Lethal measures will be deployed." But the people kept rowing. Then, out of nowhere, a new voice cut through the air, transmitted across every radio frequency on the island. It was Cale. "To the people of Jamara and the world, I'm inside the platform. I hacked the broadcast system. What you're about to see will change everything." Screens across the floating city flickered, then displayed the faces of the very politicians and businessmen who had sold the island. Secret recordings appeared one after another, videos of ministers accepting briefcases, foreign officials signing fake environmental deals, and even the president laughing on a yacht, saying, "They'll never know what hit them." Mara gasped. He made it inside. The guards on the platform began shouting, trying to shut the system down. But Cale's voice continued, "This isn't just about Jamara. It's about every island turned into a playground for the powerful. Every shore fenced off, every fisherman silenced. Tonight, we end it." Suddenly, explosions erupted across the Leviathan, not from weapons, but from inside its generators. Cale had triggered an overload. The platform's massive lights flickered and went dark. Sirens wailed. Mara's boat reached the outer fence just as the floating city began to tilt. "Cale, get out of there," she screamed into the radio. His voice came back, faint but steady. "If I go, they'll reboot the system. Someone has to shut it for good." "No, you can't, Mara," he interrupted softly. "Remember what Miss Ora said. The sea is memory. Don't let them erase it again." Then the transmission went silent. A massive blast of light tore through the night sky. The Leviathan's turbines exploded, sending shockwaves across the ocean. Metal screamed as the great floating city began to sink, swallowed by the very sea it tried to own. The people on the boats shouted and wept. Some prayed, some sang. As the platform vanished beneath the waves, a strange calm returned. The sea glowed faintly under the lightning, as if purifying itself. Mara knelt on the deck, tears streaming down her face. "He did it," she whispered. "He gave the island back." When dawn came, the horizon was empty, no fences, no guards, no steel. Only the sound of waves and the rising chant of the people. Back on the mainland, the truth spread fast. The leaked videos reached every corner of the world. Global outrage erupted. The offshore investors denied everything. But the documents Mara carried, what was left of the Paradise bonds, proved it all. The president of Isla Jamara resigned within hours. Several ministers fled. Blue Harbor's offices in London and Miami were raided. The world's media called it the Great Island Rebellion. Weeks later, a new flag was raised on the beach, made from fishing cloth, painted with one symbol, a wave turning into a fist. Mara became the island's voice, speaking before the United Nations. We are not your paradise for profit. We are people, and our ocean is not for sale. Her words echoed through hall after hall, shaking diplomats from their polished comfort. But the real monument wasn't built in marble or glass. It was the sea itself free again. Children played where fences once stood. Fishermen returned to the waters that had raised them. And at night, when the tide came in, the people said they could hear something deep below the sound of Kale's final broadcast, humming through the current like a heartbeat. A voice saying, "The sea remembers." And so, the story of Isla Jamara became a warning to the world that no paradise can survive when greed builds walls around its waters, and that when the people rise together, the tide always turns.